Good evening. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Can we all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes of November 4th?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Superintendent update, Dr. Lenardi.
Thank you, Madam President. If we can switch the screen over, I, as usual, have a couple of slides to update, and my first slide is always an outline of what the new things are just since we met last week. So actually, there's not much new, but I do want to clarify some things because I feel like there's some confusion. So I have really four things there, and the first thing says chronology of school decisions, and I want to review this with you, and then I want to just stop and see if there's any confusion about it. So when people say, well, we're switching or we're changing who we're following, that is not really the case. There have been 3 changes or updates since this pandemic began, or since I guess probably since the summer when we were deciding to come back. And what's actually happened is we have not followed CHOP guidance because they have changed it back and forth a number of times. We have not followed CDC guidance because they have sometimes changed it in the same day. In fact, a week or two ago, they talked about schools going virtual in the morning, and by the afternoon, the director was on saying how important it is for kids to be in school. So it's really been very difficult to, I read all their stuff, but it's difficult to follow both of them. Even the governor, people have pointed out that since the beginning, the governor has said when we get to 100 for 100,000 cases, that we should go virtual. And he has said that all along, but then you saw what the joint governors put out, one of which was our governor, that said kids should be back in school. I had a number of people email me that information, or that slide. So it's been quite difficult. So we had, at first, we made the decision to go virtual because we didn't have much information, and I was very nervous about keeping our students and teachers safe. By August, the superintendents in Chester County asked the Chester County Health Department to provide some metrics for us to follow, which they did. Those metrics stayed in place until about late October. They said that their team, which is made up of a number of different kinds of professionals, from doctors, nurses, public health people, those sorts, they were adding to, based on what they knew about schools, they were adding to their guidelines. So they actually came out with, in August, with guidelines to say go virtual. As you remember, they said after October 9th, they thought schools should start to go back. We should bring our youngest students back first, which of course we did. We've been back in. In November, they said they were going to add to the guidelines, which they have. And the guidelines changed slightly a few weeks ago. What we didn't see coming was on November 23rd, the governor and Department of Health and in Pennsylvania Department of Health and through PDE, which is our governing body, so when PDE says something, we must follow it, they came out unbeknownst to us with these new guidelines. So really there's been 3 things that have happened. The initial, the update from Chester County, both of which I thought were appropriate, and then this kind of one that came out from left field that we didn't see coming from the governor and from PDE. So if you go to the next slide, this looks familiar to everybody. This was the guidance since August from the Chester County Department of Health. And then the part in yellow is what they updated. They didn't change their chart. However, what they said was after we get to 80 or more, which we have blown by that number, after we get to that number, they're saying that we do what's in the bottom in yellow. And if you go to the next slide, I just blew up what it says. And in the bottom in yellow, it says these thresholds serve as guidance for instructional models and must be considered along with additional information, such as the number of COVID-19 cases and or outbreaks in schools, evidence of transmission in schools, staffing levels, adherence to preventative measures, etc. In combination with the thresholds, the additional information is used to assess the best course of action related to instructional models. So that's the piece they added. Kevin, if you just go back one. So that's what it was, blown up. So no longer do we just look at greater than 80. Now we look at greater than 80, and then we go down below. You see it says schools, outbreaks in schools, not districts. It says start to go school by school, which is what we were absolutely ready to do until The governor and PDE came out with new information just last week. So let's go to the next slide. Oh, I put this in here just to show you. These were the metrics that I was showing they put them out every Friday night. They keep them daily, but they produce them on Fridays. This was last Friday, and I said I wasn't going to send this out anymore, and I think Vice President Britton, you asked about it, and it's because we're past the number, and these are no longer the guidelines that we're allowed to follow. So right now, I think the latest is I think it's 225 and about 8%. So we're kind of hovering along this a little bit over the 200s, but that's where they are now. But I did not send that out last week because I didn't want to confuse people because we're not really supposed to be following that anymore. So then we go to the next slide. And so here we go. So if we go to the third chronology there, November 2020, and I'll say PDE because that is our governing body, but it's really the three of them together put out a new mandate for maintaining in-person schools. And as you know, there was an attestation that the board president and I had to sign off on. And last week we had a robust discussion, and we were allowed to do two things: either say we're going to stay in, but if we stay in, we have to follow all the rules, or you have to go virtual. After the November 23rd, when that came out, I got an email, and I'm sure the other 500 superintendents did as well, that said you must sign that and send it in by November 30. We want to know what your school is doing. And the sanction for not doing that is that your district ends up being closed. So my guess is everybody probably sent theirs in. I know we sent ours in on time. All right, so if we go to the next slide, here's the new guidance. And you saw this last week. They separated the schools into small, medium, and large. And so for small, that's less than 500. And you see there in red, it says once you get to 2 students or adults, either one, we're in the substantial range, so you can jump down to the bottom. So after 2 students, you have to close and go virtual for 3 to 7 days. If you have 5 or more positive or probable cases, then you have to close and go virtual for 14 days. So I showed this last time. I'll show it again with updated numbers. If you click, our smallest schools, and again, that says net enrollment because we decrease any students that go to DCA, our virtual schools. So our real numbers in those schools are larger, but they would fall into the less than 500. And right now we have no positives or probables. Now we've had a couple of scares where we thought we had a probable or positive case, but it was either 14 days ago, or the student wasn't in school for these days, or there was some nuance that made it not make the list. So we are looking at this daily. So that's small schools. So right now we're okay, but understand parents and teachers in any of these schools, Beaver Creek, Brandywine Wallace, East Ward, Pickering Valley, or Euclid Hills, if you get to 2 cases, we have to go virtual the next day. So we'll try and look at these by the close of business each day, and we'll try and make a decision, and it's going to be like a snow call where I call up and say, we hit the number 2, so we are going virtual beginning tomorrow and it says 3 to 7 days. So I want to stop there for a minute before I even go further and have a conversation with the board, because if we end up having all of a sudden, say, a slew of cases and we have 5 or 6 cases, we would automatically have to close for 14 days. But my guess is in these small schools, we might have 1 case, we might have 2 cases, and then we're going to have to make a decision. Now, it's my understanding, and it says there, public health staff will direct close contacts to quarantine. We actually are doing that work, but it's my understanding that we have to confer with the public health staff, and that would be the Chester County staff, if we want to open before the 7 days. So our plan is for 24 hours, the students go home and we do nothing. We keep the building closed. The next 24 hours, our facility staff comes in and do a thorough cleaning of the building. After the 48 hours, for the rest of the time, the rest of the 7 days, teachers could work from there, but no students are to be in the buildings. So that's low incidence, any learning support, or any other students. So let me stop there and ask the board. I'd like parents to be able to know what we're doing. And rather than to say, well, it could be 3 days, parents, it could be 4, it could be 5, it could be 6, it could be 7. I think it might be most prudent when we get a case, when we get to the 2 cases, that we say, parents, we're going virtual tomorrow for a 7-day period. And that includes weekends. So it wouldn't be 7 school days. It's just 7 days, calendar days. But board members, we do have some leeway there. So while my recommendation is mostly based on I think what would be more convenient for parents to know the answer, Because if we do less than that, I'd have to get the okay from the Department of Health, and I don't want to kind of jerk people around and say, well, it might be 3 days, it might be 4 days. I feel like it would be simplest to say 7 days, but let me just stop there and get your feedback.
Dr. Lenardi, could I ask a question, just so I understand the rule? So if we were to say 5 days, but in day 4, the health department says, no, you haven't done enough, you have to stay out the full 7, we now are going back to parents and saying, well, instead of 5 days now, we have to do the full 7.
Correct. And I don't know what the probability of that is, because this is also new, but that's the case. Any other thoughts about that 3 to 7 flexibility? Dr. Wisdom?
I think for that reason that you just stated, and also because a longer amount of time would give us, time to trace and time to understand, if there were other cases. I think that the full 7 days would be a good idea.
Other points of view about that, Director McNeil?
So Dr. Lenardi, after the deep cleaning happens, that's 48 hours. And then there's an additional day, the 3rd day. What is your stance for an additional 4 days of being out of school? What's the rationale for more days?
Well, I think that because we have to get the okay to come back, I feel like parents will be in limbo to say, well, do I need someone to, let's say they have a sitter come over or they stay home from work, they would have to say, well, on day 4, 5, 6, am I doing this? Is my child going to school on any of those days? Are they not? And I feel like it would just be the unknown right up until the 11th hour. And I feel like that would be difficult for parents. That's the main reason. I don't know why, from a health-related point of view, I don't know the difference between 3 and 7 days, but I'd like to make a number and stick to it if we can. That's really the only reason for my recommendation.
Dr. Graham? Director Graham.
I do believe that if we pick a number, stick with it, that will also diminish the number of transitions that our students and our teachers would have to go to. Just because we're saying 7 days doesn't mean that our students are not receiving an education. They will be missing 2 days, potentially, of in-person education. So, yes, while it is difficult to say that they're not going to have that in-person education, I think it's more important at that point to make sure that they're not transitioning multiple times. So any way that we can make transitions be less, I think that's very important.
Director Kring?
So I would like to have us consider for the 2 cases, I think 3 days is too quick, but maybe 5 and 7 days. And when it's just 2 cases, we just do a 5-day out. And if it's 3 or 4 cases, then we do the full 7 days. In a school of almost 500 students, 2 cases, I think you're kind of, to do the full 7 days is maybe a little excessive. I also think where you said it was unlikely, Dr. Lenardi, where you said it was unlikely that the health department would come back and say, no, you haven't done enough, because we would do our due diligence on that. You mentioned that it could be undue burden on parents. I take a different view. A lot of parents are scrambling to get to stay home with the kids or have someone at home with the kids when they have to go to work. So I'm sure that those parents would not mind if we tried to hit the 5-day, which is going to be very likely that we would, rather than the full 7 days. And doing 5 days means you're always going to have the weekend in there, no matter what. So I would say, my opinion is that we should do 5 days when it's lesser cases of 2, and just do the 7 when it's 3 or 4.
Any other opinions?
I would like to say stay at 7 days, because I think right now after the Thanksgiving holiday travel, we're only going into higher numbers rather than lower numbers. I think the 5 days, we could look at it in January when we're starting hopefully on the downward trend. But right now, we're on the upward trend.
May I just, I see your point, however, when we do hit the higher numbers, when we get to 5, then we're closing schools to 14 days, is that correct?
For these students, yeah.
So there already is a mechanism, a trigger that's going to get us to close down for longer if we get into those higher cases.
Director Britton?
May I have a question rather than a comment or opinion? If we start out this model starting with 7 days, and we notice it's not working, or let's say we go to 5 days, whatever the decision is, if we find that we're going in and out of school and it's detrimental to our students with IEPs, is there a possibility that we can relook at this, especially if maybe parents aren't taking advantage of in-school instruction as much as we thought they would?
Yeah, I was actually going to suggest that, like, whatever we pick, and again, I'm not sure there's a right answer because it's the first time we're through it. I don't know how particular the health department's going to be. And I'll know that, as a few weeks go on, we'll play it out and see how it is. So whatever we pick, I'd like to pick something and try and stick to it. But when we do that, we can, see how it goes and then revisit it and say, you know what, maybe we should go more or less. And, we can certainly have that conversation.
Dr. Delarney, did you say that the district, has to get permission? Once we close, you have to get permission from whom to reopen?
It's not so much permission, but we're supposed to interact with the Chester County Health Department. If you go 7, you don't have to. You can come back.
Okay.
But if you go less than that, you have to say to them, you have to prove to them that you did all the contact tracing, that
Gotcha.
the schools are clean, et cetera. And so hopefully that would be done, but it's, as we mentioned a couple times before, it's the contact tracing is difficult.
Who would be responsible for communicating this extra layer with the county? Like who within our staff?
That would probably be Ms. Hankins, our HR director. She's usually our contact, mostly she's our contact with the health department.
Dr. McNeil, that was my concern. That was why I was thinking 7 might be the more responsible thing to do for now, because we don't know what the parameters are from the health department, and I think it would be harder on families if after 5 days, we plan on 5, and then for some reason the Department of Health says, oh no, you missed contact tracing this person, so you just have to stay home for 2 more days. So I agree with Mr. Crane that 5 seems more reasonable overall, but I think to get this started and to minimize the transmissions, we go with the 7 for now. That's where I'm at the moment.
That's, to piggyback off of that, that's my concern. Also, it does take roughly 10, 14 days to potentially show symptoms or to test positive. So the shorter we're out, the more likely that somebody was exposed, we come back in, and then bam, we're right back to the beginning. So
Or
then we
another
have to go
person
back out
comes
again.
down with it,
Correct.
that too.
So the longer we're out, the less likely that we have to bounce right back to going out again.
And you mentioned contact tracing. So contact tracing has been, I'm sure, difficult. Who is doing that? We don't have dedicated personnel to just do contact tracing
No.
24/7.
Right, so our nurses do that in the buildings, and then if it's, and then our nurses do some of it, then our principals have to do it now that the Department of Health is no longer doing it. Before, they had been doing it, so our principals use their time to do that, and if it's after hours, then it's all administrative work.
Yeah.
If it happens during the day, then the nurses can do some of the work, during the school day.
Excuse me. How long does it typically take to complete contact tracing on a particular case?
It depends. I mean, I don't know that it would be quite proper to even answer that because like, for instance, if the student was on the bus, that's a whole nother thing. If the student, like we had a student that actually had a false negative reading and came in, and then we had to trace everywhere he went or she went, and everyone that they were in contact with. So it took long. Other times, we find out that, oh no, the student was only here, they didn't ride the bus, or they weren't in for the last couple days, so, and it ends up being quick. So it's, I don't know what the parameters are. Maybe, Ms. Hankins, you could say, like, what the shortest, we could get it done in a day, the longest has taken us, I don't know, maybe been 3 or 4 days? I'm not sure. What would you say?
A sports event or a bus involved, then it does take more time. They have to review cameras, and in some cases, the students don't remember who they were sitting next to. So it can take a couple days, depending on the situation. Generally, the nurses try to get most of it done during the day with principals assisting as best as possible. So the nurses are working really hard. We appreciate their efforts.
Thank you.
So, all right, so, well, does anyone else want to weigh in on which, I mean, I feel like go
So
ahead.
we're not, do we need to vote on, because we'd have
No,
to
we
wait
don't-
till next week, or is
No,
this
I don't
just
think we need to
something-
vote at all. Like, I just think that I just wanted to get a sense about the board, like, did you have a strong feeling about what to do? It seems like more people are saying 7 days, but if I'm not reading that right, what if we just go with, if we get 2 cases or more with this small group, we go 7 days, and then we revisit it, and we just see, is that long enough? Is it helping us not go in and out and in and out, and we'll go from there. And also, if other schools do it differently, I might be able to say, well, how was it when you interacted with the health department? Is there much, involvement there, or do they pretty much say, okay, if you've done the best you can do, you're good? Well, then maybe it's different. So there's
We can
just
revisit it.
yeah, we can revisit it. Okay, all right, so then let me keep going. So if we go to the next slide then, so, I'm hoping we don't get to the 14-day one because we'll catch it earlier, but if we go to the next slide, now this is the medium group.
Well,
Yeah, medium group from 500 to 900 students, and so Bradford Heights, Lineville Elementary, Shimona Creek, Springton Manor, West Bradford, and the STEM Academy are all here, and again, it's a net enrollment because we took out any DCA students. You can see we're in good shape here, but the numbers are a little different. Because these schools are bigger, once you get to 4, now you're out for, and I'm going to say rather than 3 to 7, I'm going to say you're out for 7 days. I'm hoping we don't get more than 7. We'd have to have kind of an outbreak of some sort, and then we'd be out for 14. So hopefully 7 is our number, and again, that includes weekends. So 4 is the number here. I want to point something out. Lineville Elementary, as you know, was just closed for 7 and went virtual, and so what happens is, even though it's a 14-day rolling number, after you're out and you come back, you start at 0. So Lineville is at 0 right now, and now their clock will start ticking again. The other schools, they're in the 14-day rolling, and right now we look pretty good. If we go to the large schools, and we'll keep going small, medium, large, because this is what the state has suggested, so greater than 900 students, once you get to 6, you're in that 3 to 7, so I'm going to call that 7, and hopefully, like East and West, we're at 11 as we started this because we didn't know this was coming, but now we'll try and nip it in the bud a little earlier, get the kids out of there for a bit, get things to settle down, and then get them back in. So if we look at these schools, Marsh Creek, Downingtown Middle, Lineville Middle, East and West. And you see, I put Downingtown Middle, Lineville, East and West. I just put all of them at 0s, even though if you look on our website or recent communications to those buildings or parents, there's numbers, but when they come back, they'll start over at 0. And Marsh Creek is the only one that would have the rolling day 14 days, because they weren't out yet. So they're at 2 right now. They would have to get to 6 in order to be out for 7 days because they're large schools. Any questions about this new guidance? So this is the third change since we started, and this one we have no control over. So when people say, why are you doing this? We're doing it because we have to do it. The only other option is to close all of our buildings, and we decided to try this and see how it goes.
Dr. Lenardi, can I ask a question about the schools that have not had a case? I just wondered if there's any commonality among them. For example, are there more children in those schools attending cyber schools, or more children in those schools going virtual, fewer children who are brick and mortar? Or I'm assuming that the safety measures are equally as stringent in all of the schools.
And these numbers, they've taken out the cyber students. The ones that are in Cyber Academy are not included, is that correct?
Yes.
So they're already out.
Oh, I thought STEM had 800 and some students there listed. The one before that there are more than 800.
No, that's the,
So those are all students who are
Are they
going
all
brick and
doing-
mortar in person at STEM.
Right, now they may not, some students
Okay.
now who are considered brick and mortar are choose because of the high numbers, or maybe another reason, mostly I think the high numbers, they're choosing not to come in.
Right.
But we still have to count them in the net, because I said, if the kids aren't coming, do we lower the number? And they said, no, you only lower it if they're totally virtual, such as in an academy.
Okay.
So,
So they're doing brick and mortar, but
They've
they're
opted for
staying
totally
home.
virtual now
Right.
for a week or
They're staying
whatever.
home.
Okay.
Right. So
okay.
again, everything
I must
is-
have missed that, all right.
the rules are quite tricky. But I'll show you those enrollments soon. Like, I think when you compare STEM to East and West, I think the reason is really the numbers. There's so few, so
Yeah.
many fewer kids
Right.
there that it's just less likely,
Right.
than so the bigger, definitely the more difficult. But it's a good question. I'm not sure if it's just lucky or because we're following, the mitigations pretty well. So,
So, we had talked about buses and the safety protocols that were and were not being followed on buses. So I'm assuming that has been tightened up
yes.
now, because that's a variable that,
In
of
fact, we
course,
put
none of
that
us-
in our amended contract, that those mitigation things had to happen. And so they're doing much better now, yeah.
Okay.
That was definitely a problem.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, I just wondered, when you have no cases, what's,
Yeah, we can try and look at that. I'm
why
just
is that?
not sure. Yeah. Okay, so any other questions about our new guidance?
I would just like to say before you leave, the 7 days, I totally agree with your recommendation, especially because I know that principals especially and nurses are working very, very, very hard to try to get to the root of what is happening here. And, that's sad on another level because they have so much more to offer to teachers and students than finding out how a child might have contracted a virus.
I do think our teachers will probably appreciate the 7 days, just from a safety point of view. It might make them feel a little better as well, just that we give it that time. This is just a combination of all the schools. I just wanted to show you where we are, and we'll keep looking at positive and probable cases, and we'll put them in our chart based on small, medium, and large, and you see that blue, green, red. I just color-coded it just to show you. But the tricky part of this, I think, is that it's like a snow call, where when we get to those numbers, and they're not very many numbers, I have to make that call and say, okay, parents, tomorrow you're virtual, and you won't be back till next Wednesday or whatever it is. And so that's unfortunate, because we try not to do things last minute, and this is going to be last minute as soon as we see the numbers. So I want to just share that with the board and make sure our public knows that as well.
Director Graham?
Could you just real quick clarify, I know that you did this last week, but clarify again exactly who counts as a positive and probable? Because I do believe it says on the website that somebody who's quarantining but not tested doesn't count. So what is a probable, and just if you could clarify that would be great.
Ms. Shealy, can you hear that? Can you differentiate or just explain the definition of probable and positive cases?
Sure. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
So a probable case is basically a person who has symptoms, so they're showing symptoms of coronavirus, and they have been a close contact to a positive case, somebody who's a positive case or a probable case. It's called an EpiLink. That means the health department considers that if you're showing symptoms and you've been in close contact with someone who's positive, they treat you as if you're positive. So that means you need to quarantine just as if you were positive. You need to, we'll do contact tracing just as if you were positive. So it's treated exactly the same way. And then a positive case, obviously, is someone who has actually gone and gotten a test and gotten a confirmed positive. Sometimes we do have probable cases that turn into positive cases. So let's say I was in close contact with somebody, I'm showing symptoms, I count as probable until I go and I get a test. If I get a test that comes back positive, I change to positive. But how we're counting it in our system basically is that once you're probable, you're counted, you're not being double counted as probable and then positive. So that's what's going into our chart online, is if you're probable or positive on the date that you first have symptoms or the date of your specimen collection if you're asymptomatic, that's the date that goes into that chart.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I do want to point out, too, that in cases, as we contact trace, we are always finding that it has happened, that the positivity has happened outside of our schools. And so it's been, that part's kind of maddening, and because we're following all the rules, and actually if everybody did what we do in schools, it wouldn't be nearly as bad, but that makes it difficult for us.
Dr. Lenardi, can I ask, on the website, the COVID dashboard, the last date here is 11/27. Is the information that you have posted on the screen now, is this the most current, or does that reflect 11/27?
Yeah, go ahead, Ms. Shealy.
You need to scroll. So if you go to the bottom of the
Yes, you're right.
of the chart, you can see you need to scroll. Yeah, unfortunately, because we have so many schools and we're trying to squeeze in 14 days there. If we go any smaller on that chart, you can't read it. And the website has a limitation that you can only have something so wide. So there needs to be that scroll feature there.
Thank you. I clicked on reporting criteria, but I got something else. So, okay, I didn't think to scroll. Thank you. Scroll across.
All right, any other questions about this? I'll review it to some degree again next week, and at this meeting next week, by the 9th, DMS East and West will be back. So again, we'll keep our fingers crossed, we'll watch those schools, and we'll see what happens. But at least looking at our data right now, tomorrow, all the other schools are back. So we'll just take it day by day, and we'll update parents as we get new numbers.
I'm sorry, I apologize.
No worries.
Dr. Lenardi, for the benefit of the public, though, just so that they understand, after a school goes out, the expectation is those numbers would return to zero, correct? Okay.
Right.
And that's why people are looking at charts right now with zeros.
Yes. Right. For the schools that are out, yeah. So that part's good. There's some confusing pieces to it. And every time I go to a meeting, I find out new rules about it. So at this point, I showed the chronology, and now we're in PD. We're in that third piece, PD's chart, and we'll go probable and positives, and we'll continue to follow that. The last thing, President Bertoni asked about this last time, and that is the attendance, because as the cases go up, some parents are choosing to keep their children home, which of course is perfectly fine. So Dr. Reed put a chart together, and Dr. Reed, would you just review that for the board?
Sure. So as of right now, the way that we're able to obtain the data is to do a physical head count. But thankfully, yesterday in Administrative Cabinet, Dr. Mattei informed us he's working on a possible solution in Infinite Campus that will be able to pull this data. So if you look at November 30th, which was Monday, East, West, DMS, LMS, and Lionville Elementary all have an X because they were closed. And we asked principals to collect this data Monday afternoon, and that's why you see at Marsh Creek, it's an estimate. He wasn't able to get a quite accurate head count. But PIP stands for present in person, and that is another Dr. Mattei term. So if you look at Monday, we had 1,856 kids that were present in person, and we were expecting a possible total of 2,348. So K-12, our attendance rate was 79% for Monday. So Tuesday would have been December 1st. That would have been our M to Z group. And same thing, you can walk down the list there. Some schools had X's because we were not in, they did not have students that day. And our attendance rate was about 83%, K-12. And then obviously you have today's data, December 2nd, and we're back at around an attendance rate of 79%. And if you look at the elementary schools, most are a little higher than that number. Currently STEM, if you do some basic math, roughly 55% right now. So they're bringing that overall percentage a little bit down. And but roughly between 79 and 83% for the past 3 days while we've been in school.
Thank you. Is that helpful?
Yeah.
We'll keep track of that, and I think it is good to know. And I think part of the conversation was, will we ever get to a point where it's not worth it to stay open? But at this point, a lot of parents are still sending their children to school, so I feel like as though it is.
So to that, are you finished, Dr. Wood?
That's completes my report, thank you.
So to that point, you know, as board members, we have received many, many letters over the last few months regarding in school, out of school, what we're doing right, what we're doing wrong. And I've received a number of letters, as have other board members, from staff and teachers saying, you know, concerned about their safety and wondering why we haven't been in the buildings. And so after speaking with Dr. Lenardi, well, let me go backtrack and say the reason we haven't been in the buildings is not because we don't want to be or we don't think it's safe or anything to do with that. We haven't been in the buildings because our safety protocols are that visitors, we should avoid having many visitors in the buildings to limit our contact and limit the amount of people that might spread the virus in the schools. But with that in mind, I asked Dr. Lenardi and we talked about it, and I went to visit a few schools. And I have to tell you that I am so, every time I get disappointed in all the trouble we have with the coronavirus, the best thing I can do is go and be around our students and our staff. The buildings were just, I went to 2 different elementary schools and I was in a high school last week, and they're just humming away. The kids are thrilled to be there. I spoke with teachers and they, you know, there's a lot of talk about the hybrid model, and it is not easy, and they are working their tails off to put it on, but they're getting the knack of it. They enjoy the contact with their students. And it doesn't mean there isn't risk. It doesn't mean that the anxiety level isn't for some teachers and some of our staff quite high. And I certainly understand that. But I do think we should all appreciate the hard work that they're putting in, especially the nurses. They are the key to our students who may not be feeling well, our teachers who are struggling with dealing with things they never thought they'd have to deal with. But the kids have been great. They're all wearing their masks. There's plexiglass up where people have asked for it. The 6 feet rule is being followed. And it really made me feel better that education is going on. So I just wanted to let you all know that the buildings are doing great, and that we're going to continue to try and keep everyone safe. And I'm encouraged about those numbers that students really want to be there, and I appreciate everything everyone has done. So with that, we'll move on to our agenda. Personnel Committee report. Director Wisdom.
Thank you, President Bertoni. Have some consent agenda items for personnel. Number 1, request approval of the personnel items. If there's any questions about those? And request approval of a renewal of services with PAREAP for professional staffing recruitment postings. Total cost $1,049. Any questions on that? Go ahead.
Director Wisdom, I wondered what other resources are we using for staffing recruitment besides PAREAP? I know we use quite a few. Ms. Hankins, is that correct?
There's probably about a dozen, but it's based on the position and what the needs are of posting, but generally LinkedIn, we obviously use Facebook and Twitter and the normal social media. PAREAP is just the go-to for teachers, so we consistently post there as well, and we can also source candidates.
Yeah. I
There's
know in
others,
this day and age when we're trying to get as many diverse candidates as we can, it's
Absolutely.
important to have a variety of options. Thank you.
Yeah, K-12 education is another one, so. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Wisdom.
And I can move on to curriculum. Consent agenda items, request approval of a renewal agreement with ETR Associates for the K-12 Health Smart online resource. Total cost $13,700. Any questions on that one?
I just have one question. Is there any professional development that comes with that?
So there's not. This is a resource we've been using for several years now. This is simply the renewal for the online access to the resource.
Thank you.
Number 2, request approval of the purchase of a replacement kiln from the ceramic shop for Downingtown West High School. Total cost $10,456. Go ahead.
So I probably should know this, but are these kilns on a replacement cycle so that now it's West's turn to get a new kiln?
So we're getting there. You may remember when we presented the capital budget last year, this was an item that was in there. This particular kiln that's being replaced is around 40 years old. And so we're trying to replace our oldest and most needy at the moment so that we can get on a more consistent cycle, so we're not potentially waiting 40 years to replace each one.
Makes sense. Thank you, Dr. Chance. Thank you, Director Wisdom.
Number 3, request approval for the donation, disposal, or sale of the following items, which you see below. Any questions on those?
Can I just comment to thank, I guess it's Dr. Chance or whomever he had do this investigation, that the number of years for most things are next to the item, and I had asked about that last meeting. Thank you.
Action agenda item, request approval of a waiver agreement with the parents of a district student. Total cost $25,000. Any questions on that? But did want to mention about these renewals. A lot of these items we don't really need to see on our agenda necessarily, or if they're renewals, or if they're already budgeted for. And that would actually save the administration some time and make it more convenient for not only the administration, but also for like people that we might be paying, or to get items in a more timely fashion. We should maybe, I think, in the future, think about moving some of these items, like things that are already on the budget, already been budgeted for, already been, we already expect to be getting, like renewals or something that we just get in a timely fashion, like that are on a replacement basis. So I just wanted to, I know I've mentioned that before, but I just wanted to mention that as maybe something we could talk about, moving to a different place in the future, so we don't have to take our time here and take time away from the administration.
Actually, Director Wisdom, this is, this comes up every few years. I think for the benefit of board members that are interested in this, that's why they're listed, and they're listed in the consent agenda, so they aren't really taking, other than us looking at it committee of the whole, and for me anyway, I think it's our fiduciary responsibility just to see whether see that the money is being spent or not spent.
Well, that's why I think maybe, we could just put it in a different place, so like a board update, somewhere where we can be aware of it and we can see it and know what's being bought, what's being renewed, but when we just have to, when we have to wait 30 days, or when we have to wait a whole cycle to renew something, like one thing, if we're, say, we want to renew something and we're going to pay for the renewal, whoever we're paying may have to wait, an extra month, or we may have to wait an extra month to get something that could be useful to us
I also
tomorrow.
think it's important for the taxpayers to be able to see it also, but
Yeah, I think we need
other
to, I
opinions.
think we need that as part of oversight, but the fact that they're renewals means that it just comes up on a schedule, so we don't have to hold it till the last minute. If it's a renewal that's coming up, say, January 1st, we should be voting on it in November, December, something like that.
If
So-
they put it on the agenda, we'll approve it, and I think it leads to questions, as Dr. McNeil asked, what is it, or Director Blust, it's an interest to know what's going on in our schools and what's programs are being used and supported. So,
Are you proposing a certain dollar amount, or are you just, what is
I
the,
think that just,
well, what are you curious about, I guess is my question. Could you tell me more?
If I may, this was a discussion actually that happened at our committee meeting, and the kiln would actually be a good example potentially. So the kiln was something that we budgeted for in the capital budget, presented to the board at a public meeting that would be in the budget, had the opportunity, of course, to chair and describe. And so that money was budgeted for. When it's then time to order the kiln, our art curriculum leader gets a quote for that, for the new kiln, and if we didn't require board approval, we could then pay for that item, and of course, it takes about 2 to 4 weeks for the kiln to get here and have the kiln on premises sooner, rather than having to wait potentially 2 to 4 weeks, depending on when she obtains the quote, and then have it. So we're essentially reapproving something that's already been approved and discussed at a public meeting at another time. So that was the discussion that we had at our meeting about how we may be able to expedite getting things on site into the hands of our teachers and students and have those resources at their disposal. The Health Smart resource being another one. Our curriculum leader actually obtained this quote in the first week of November, but it wasn't quite in time to make the November agenda. So ostensibly, we then waited another month to then pay the vendor for something that we had already budgeted for, and again, presented at a previous public meeting and had money in the budget specifically for. So it was really just those types of items where they've already been approved in some capacity, and perhaps we could expedite accessing them prior to the next public meeting. But certainly, we understand that that's how we've done things for quite some time. We're certainly not trying to not be transparent about how we're spending funds. We're really just trying to be as efficient as we can and not necessarily approve things twice, perhaps, such that we're able to, again, get them in the hands of our teachers and students more expeditiously.
Again, just being curious, if we were to, since this is something we've already approved, essentially is what you're asking to do, where would you anticipate you could tell the board that this is being done? Someone mentioned a board update. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, Director Wisdom actually mentioned the board update. That wouldn't be a bad idea, potentially, because it's something that we do weekly. We could, and I know certainly in the curriculum department, each week or maybe one time per month, we could say, these are the things that we plan to purchase, or this month we'll be ordering the kiln that we budgeted for in the capital budget, or ordering the musical instruments that we budgeted for in the capital budget, or things that have sort of already been approved. We could provide that information to the board, and then certainly you could ask those questions as well.
Director Kring?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, the capital budget, we do extensive discussions of that every year. But that is, for lack of a better term, more of an aspirational budget, because we don't actually know the costs until we get the bids in, which can lead to further discussion. So I understand what you're saying. I just think, especially if it's something that's on a timeline replacement that it's not something that just broke just then. It's something that is not where it should be anymore, that we should go through the process. I think as part of our oversight, we need to have those questions before us, see what the bidders come in at, especially for the higher price stuff. So
I agree with the higher price stuff.
But even the kiln, I mean, if you knew you were replacing it, I mean, it could be ordered and put before the board in June to be budgeted and spent in July, and still have it in plenty of time for school to start. Myself personally, I like to see the cost. I like to see the vendor. I just think it's information that is our responsibility as a board member.
Certainly, and for what it's worth, traditionally that is the timeline within which we make those orders. Of course, this year, we didn't have access to our buildings in the summer, and weren't even quite sure when we might be in person at a time when we might be able to get it delivered, which is why it waited. But certainly, typically that would be the timeline.
And I think, Dr. Reed, that I'm not sure, there is a dollar amount that if a committee chair and the board president agrees to it, it can be expedited prior to a board meeting. We have done that before.
I was not aware of that. That's good to know.
Could you tell us more about that, President?
We've had that, like with
more about that.
I've only been here 5
with the
years.
electrical, when the electric went at Downingtown.
What's the dollar amount? I remember doing it.
Yeah, I don't, we need to, I would be fine with making a more specific policy if there isn't a policy that would allow that in this kind of situation. I'd be very comfortable with that. I am not comfortable with taking it off the agenda.
Yeah, the electrical was not a de minimis either. That was a pricey
Right.
thing anyway, so.
But there is,
Let me just weigh in for a minute. We can do it however you want, however the board wants to do it. It's an unusual practice, and what happens is when people come to Downingtown, they say, why are we approving this? We already approved the budget, and we had it in the budget, and now we're approving it again. It's an unusual and unnecessary practice. If everybody likes that we do things twice like that, it's not efficient, and that's really the point. It's not the amount, or it's just that it's just we're doing it a second time, and it's odd and unusual.
right, well, I would argue that Downingtown has been very fiscally responsible, far more
It
than
doesn't-
many other
I don't
districts,
agree with
so
that.
I
I don't
wouldn't.
think that's true, but I think you should ask other people.
Well, I am.
Is there any other board members that like to weigh in or ask questions? Curious?
Because it keeps coming up, and we should probably put it to bed.
Well, I won't bring it up anymore. I get it now. I appreciate your consideration. I trust that our departments are budgeting and spending our money wisely, and I'm sure that you guys also trust that, and I just thought it would lighten things up a little bit, but I also understand where you're coming from, so thank you for your consideration, and that concludes my report.
Does anybody else want to add to that? I don't want to be,
I just want to say I'm not comfortable ever putting something in the board update like this. I think this is taxpayer money, and so taxpayers need to know if the board is providing oversight for taxpayer funds, then the public should be aware of it. Now, having said that, we do just put this on a consent agenda, so I'm not sure how much time it takes, but a board up, and maybe the public doesn't even know what a board update is, and maybe that should be explained so that they understand exactly what a board update is. But if something needs to be purchased quickly, that could be something to just let the board know about so that you're not held up with what you need to provide.
we have purchased things in the past and approved it after the budget, at a following meeting. So if there was something that time, Dr. Reed?
I just did a quick search while sitting here, and policy 611 is titled Purchases Budgeted. And it reads, all purchases that are within budgetary limits may be made upon authorization of the business manager or designee unless the contemplated purchase is for more than $21,000, in which case prior approval by the board is required.
Perfect.
So I just need to ask Dave.
That's right.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Okay. Moving on. Policy Committee reports. Director Houghton.
Thank you, President Petroni. We have several policies out for 30-day review. You can see those there. And we have no new policies. Does anyone have any questions about the policies that are out for 30-day review? Questions? That concludes my report.
Thank you. Finance Committee.
Thank you, President Bertoni. Consent agenda items. Just one on the consent agenda, request approval to accept a donation of Mac computers and Finale software licenses for the exclusive use of East, West, and STEM high school music programs from the Music Parents Association of the Downingtown High Schools. Donation value $28,239.95. I want to thank the Musical Parents Association for that very generous gift going to 3 high schools. Any questions about that?
Dr. Crane, Director Crane,
Yeah,
is that based upon fundraising that they did, or can you explain where that money came from?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Sorry, was that based on the group doing,
This was through they secured a county grant funding that allowed them to purchase the 5 high-end Mac computers.
thank you.
Okay, action agenda. Item number 1, request approval of the district's June 30th, 2020 audited financial statements, including fund balances, final budget, and fund transfers. We did get together with the auditors via Zoom last week, and the auditors once again issued a clean opinion on the district's 1920 financial statements, and there were no findings or comments, which is good. The district finished the 2019-2020 budget with a $2.9 million surplus after normal capital expenditures, which excludes Euclid Hills and STEM construction. The shutdown of schools due to COVID reduced expenditures, which helped contribute to the surplus. So it was a unique experience, the surplus that we had last year. Any questions or comments? Questions? No? Item number 2, request approval of a settlement agreement and full release from disputed tuition payments with the Pennsylvania Leadership Charter School for the 2016-17 fiscal year and subsequent fiscal year litigation. Total cost $25,000. Mr. Mattis, do you want to give a brief summary of this? Just I have it right up here, but I think you were very involved with this.
Yes, this goes back to our 2016-17 fiscal year. And, each year we have to go through a calculation that's a PDE form. We fill in the blanks and it spits out what our charter school tuition payment has to be per child. And it's regular ed and special needs students as well. So we followed the PDE, Pennsylvania Department of Education prescribed methodology, which said at that point in time to use actual expenses. So we used the actual expenses for the prior school year and completed the forms, sent it to PDE, and that's what we based our tuition payments to our charter schools for, whether it's virtual charter school or brick and mortar charter school. Subsequent to that, the charter schools sued Pennsylvania Department of Education and said, you're not following the guidelines, the law, the letter of the law, which says you are to use budgeted amounts, not actual expenditures. So once that was determined, all the school districts in Pennsylvania used budgeted amounts instead of actual expenditures. But back in 2016-17, we followed actual expenditures. So PA Leadership Charter School is saying, hey, you owe us money based on budgeted amounts, not actual amounts. So we have a hearing scheduled with Pennsylvania Department of Education to, I won't say litigate, but have a hearing to see, what their ruling might be. And we think that the maximum exposure with payments for budgeted compared to actual, legal expenses, and actually interest payments too. We would have to pay them perhaps 6% interest for every year going back to 2016-17. We have, our maximum potential exposure is about $115,000, including legal bills. So our legal counsel, our Levin, our attorneys, are recommending a settlement of $25,000, which takes care of anything for PA Leadership Charter School back to the beginning of time up through the date of if the board would approve the settlement agreement. Not anything good into the future, but anything in the past. So they couldn't go back and revisit this for another fiscal year or, that type of thing. It would be settled. So the recommendation is to settle the litigation and potential, it could potentially, if PDE ruled in our favor, the charter school could then appeal it to the Pennsylvania Commonwealth Court, which again is more legal fees and more exposure. So our recommendation is to enter into a settlement agreement for $25,000 and call this item complete.
Yeah, and I want to thank the business office. I think this would set a precedent as well if we were to not settle. So I think pursuing it in this manner is probably wise. And thank you to the business office and Mike and Alicia as well. They're in there because I know they were working hard on this.
Yes, many school districts are involved in this. and many are settling. I think probably everybody's letting Philadelphia bear the burden of this and set the precedent.
I just find it unbelievable. So if we budget less, we'd only have to pay them less? I mean, that makes no sense that we should be giving them a budgeted amount.
It's the way the law is written.
Huh?
The law is written that way, that says use the budgeted figures. PDE, when they came up with their guidance and their essentially a spreadsheet to fill out, they said, well, it's more accurate to use actual numbers. So we used actual numbers back then until, again, they sued PDE and said you should be using budgeted figures.
Any other questions? Any public comment? Nope.
Thank you, Director Kring. Vice President Britton, Facilities Report.
Thank you, President Bertone. Consent agenda items. Number 1, request approval for a change order. This is an add to Cadwell, Heckles, and Egan contractor on the STEM Academy Edition project for premium-only overtime for carpentry work. Total cost $4,292.90.
As you know, we were trying to get the STEM Academy open and get it ready for students. So this was to hasten the carpentry work of especially casing the windows on the interior surfaces so the teachers wouldn't be disrupted while they were Zooming from their rooms. So we can have the prerogative. We would pay just the premium side, not the half-time, not time and a half. We just paid the half-time to hasten the project on so the carpenter was out of the room by the time the teachers started teaching Zoom lessons from their classrooms.
Vice President Britton, may I ask, what does that line mean, authorized by owner?
It just means that it's authorized by the school board. I mean, the school district.
Yeah, I've never seen that on any change order. Was there some reason?
It could be there, couldn't be there. I just wanted to help you give an explanation that Joe and I authorized.
They tend to refer to us as the owner. That's typical language.
I'm sorry?
They tend to refer to us as the owner. That's typical language.
So why doesn't the next one have it?
I suppose it could.
It just seemed, I don't recall ever seeing.
Well, I just didn't want you to think that it was authorized, or it was requested by the contractor. It's not something he instigated.
Okay.
Number 2, request approval for a change order. This is also an add to Cadwell, Heckles, and Egan General Contractor on the STEM Academy Edition project for additional survey work required to address Campbell Drive design issues and to replace 2 stormwater inlet tops. Total cost $5,520.01.
Again, this was just another change order we needed to make sure the pitch of the driveway. This one dealt mostly with the eastern edge or the entrance driveway before it was paved to make sure we have positive drainage away from the building. The original inlet boxes that were on there had too high a top. It would have caused the pavement to be 4 inches higher than it is today after we finished the paving. There was a risk during a heavy rainfall. If you know that building, when you pull in on the east end of the building, there's a ramp which goes down into the basement. And the driveway would have been too level, and if it would have had a heavy rain like we had on Monday, there was a potential that the water could spill off the driveway and get down the ramp, and that potentially floods the basement floor of the building. So we wanted to tilt the driveway towards the neighbor's property, but there's a curb there. It goes up against the curb and drops into these inlet boxes to make sure during heavy rains it ran away from the building and not risk flooding the basement some night in a heavy storm or something.
Number 3, request approval for a change order, add to Cadwell, Heckles, and Egan General Contractor on the STEM Academy Edition project for milling existing asphalt at Stadium Driveway to resolve ponding. Total cost $7,021.52.
Again, this was dealing with stormwater we did the Campbell Drive. If you remember, a couple of months ago, we had a change order to add some inlet boxes to Campbell Drive, so there wouldn't be anybody splashed or it wouldn't ice up during the winter. Between the student lot, the existing student lot today, and where that Campbell Drive meets west, When we milled it to do the final paving on there, we brought the milling closer and actually into the Kottmeyer Stadium entrance to make sure that the water could continue to go down and get to this inlet boxes down in the Kottmeyer Stadium entrance there to make sure it didn't pond or ice up during the winter, because we park a lot of buses here during dismissal time, and there's a lot of traffic on this driveway, and we did the final paving, and then I've watched it in 2 big rain events now, and it drains perfectly and does what it's supposed to do. So it's a critical grade on that whole driveway around Stem and up to West, because there's very, very little fall. I mean, we got inches per 100 feet of fall there, so it was very critical, and that's why it had to be surveyed again. We were actually surveying to the tenths of inches to get this to drain properly.
Number 4, request approval for a change order to Cadwell, Heckles, and Egan, general contractor on the STEM Academy Edition project for masonry costs associated with widening doorways, A036, A111, and A202. Total cost $7,189.21.
Once we put the connecting wall between the A addition, which is up near the gym end of the building, and where it meets the old addition, we looked at the doorway that was cut in there, and at each level there's 3 classrooms in there, so you have basically 75 students in the room, and during a class change 40 minutes later, 75 students could want to exit out that door, and a new 75 are coming in. So we cut that doorway. It was only 36 inches. We made it 42 inches to the maximum we could make it in width. So the swing of the door, when it came out into the stair tower hall, didn't stick into the stair. So it was to widen that. So it facilitated students moving with a book bag or a computer with them, so they could pass each other through this connecting door that separates the old section from the new section. So it just makes movement of students a lot easier to do, especially important in a high school with kids carrying computers and book bags.
Go ahead.
So that's about $24,000 in added change orders.
Yeah, and these are since the beginning of the project. What we're doing here is closing out our general contractor, Caldwell, Heckles, and Egan. That's why it looks like there's a lot, but they've occurred over the past year and a half or 18 months that we've been doing the project. And then you're going to see another one on here that is a conglomeration of a lot of site things that we've been holding until we got our time tickets and proof to substantiate that the change orders were really legitimate on there. And it's just things you do at the end of the project to close them out. And next month, you're going to see me come in with other change orders. I think they're mostly all going to be to our credit from the other primes on the project, because we'll be closing them out next.
Those. Yeah. So where are we with the budget for STEM?
The budget on this, we're going to come in under budget, believe it or not. Both projects.
So even with change orders, we're coming in on.
Yeah, even though we're looking like we're doing change orders here, we're not. We're going to have credits from the other contractors, which I think are going to have us under budget.
Good.
Yeah, we have budgeted for change orders in the.
Yeah,
original,
you'll see them coming next month, and they'll be in form of a deduct off of those contractors.
Thank you, Vice President Britton.
Number 5, request approval for submission of Plan Con Part 1 interim reporting to the Pennsylvania Department of Education for the Euclid Hills Elementary School new construction. Part 1 provides for the reporting of change orders and/or supplemental contracts during construction.
This is, I'm sure new board members aren't familiar with the Plan-Con process. That used to be a reimbursement process, the PDE. There's quite a formality and steps you have to go through. It goes from actually A to K. And this is an I, which stands for an interim report, which we will have to send them on. This is on the Euclid project, because that project is a Plan-Con process. It is a reimbursable project. There was if I can get the dates right, I think it was sometime in the spring of 2018 or fall of 2018, PDE said they were going to stop the Plan-Con process, which was a reimbursement process. We got this Euclid Hills project in. I think we were the last one to get in the door with a reimbursable project. We got it in at the 11th hour. for that. So it is a reimbursable project, and I is just, you do I a couple times if you have to. If you refinance or if you have more change orders involved in it, your budget changes in it, you have to file an I with PDE, and this is just a process for them. And this is in preparation for a change order that'll be coming next month on the Euclid Hills project, and that will be another deduct change order in our favor. But you still have to file an I for that.
I think one of you guys actually drove the paperwork to Harrisburg that day, didn't you?
Yeah.
Not that we're sure there's even money in the reimbursement, but did we make the deadline for the building being finished? I know that there was.
On the Euclid Hills project we did, on the STEM one, we did not.
Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't think there was any PlanCon money on STEM.
There's no PlanCom money on STEM.
Yeah.
Only on the Euclid Hills one.
Right, okay.
Okay, moving on to action agenda items. Number 1, request approval for a change order, add to Cadwell, Heckles, and Egan, general contractor on the STEM Academy Edition project for additional site work for unforeseen conditions, unsuitable soil exchange, locating and replacing 2-inch water line, removing an unknown buried concrete electrical duct bank, and relocating an unknown rainwater collector pipe along Section C. Total cost $37,312.38.
And this is a conglomeration of all site things since we started the project, that we have verification tickets on time now, and we're committed. So, and this should close out Caldwell's, Heckles, and Egan on the project.
Okay. So this is cumulative, because some of this, like that electrical box was when you were excavating way back when, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Before we move on, I'd just like to thank you, Mr. Lover, and our contractors and everyone who worked so hard, our facilities department, in getting the STEM building ready. It looks amazing. The board had the opportunity to go visit it today, and I felt really proud walking around in there. And I can see that our students are going to love being in that environment. So just thank you very much. And that concludes my report.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And if I could just add, the community, especially people who live in the area, really appreciate the ability to match the stone so that the building continues to have the same facade that it had.
Yeah. Everybody thinks those 2 additions have been there for years now.
Yeah.
You can't tell the difference.
We have one more additional action item, request approval of the attorney-client fee agreement between the Downingtown Area School District and the Franz Law Group, APLC, Dillon McCandles, King, Cutler, and Graham LLP, and the Levin Legal Group, PC, to join the Jewel litigation. I do have a question. A fee agreement, what does that entail? Because I thought we were joining this with, the onus was on the attorneys.
I don't know. That's the wording that Attorney Levin gave us, and
Well, could you go back and tell Attorney Levin?
yeah.
We'd like to know what the fee agreement is. This is for the public, if you're watching, the Jewel litigation. School districts around the country are suing to get some reimbursement for the cost of all the added security and things that have gone on in the buildings because our children have started using the Jewel products. So it is a health and wellness issue for us. I would just like to know what the fee agreement is before we make any vote next week. So could we look into it for next
Sure.
week?
Yep, can do that.
Does anyone else have any questions?
Oh, it is at the back of our agenda for today. It's at the very end.
It's where?
It is at the very end. If you're looking at it online.
Oh, I see. Online. Okay, I don't have my, it is on the, okay. So I will take a look at it then. I didn't
What did she
know.
say? The the
The
jewelry.
contract must be on that.
Yeah, it is, but I didn't, but off the top of my head, I didn't know.
I didn't,
what
yeah, and
the-
I don't have it
It's just
put up.
been a
so-
little while, actually.
Okay,
since we
well,
talked
that'll
about
be my question next week if I don't understand.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Okay?
Okay, no worries.
Thank you. And then moving on, discussion. Have board members had the opportunity to look at the calendar, and do you have questions for administration?
I have not had any opportunity. I'd like some time, maybe next meeting, our December 9th meeting. I apologize that I haven't reviewed them carefully.
Anybody else have any? Well, have them ready for next week, because I imagine you'd like to approve them.
Yeah, I would like to.
At least one next week.
I will say this, we did reach out, and actually Ms. Boff reached out to our teacher leaders to then reach out to their various departments to get feedback. And then also we put it on the website, and so Ms. Shealy did some reaching out there. So they both have a little bit of information, but honestly, we got very little feedback this year. And I don't know if it's because people are just so busy doing what they're doing, but Ms. Boff, how about if you just say what you heard? And again, these are, usually we only bring forward the things that lots of people said, but we only had a few people respond, so go ahead.
To start with, we'll go with just a couple of the positives that when looking at the district calendar, staff members truly appreciate the district providing days off for holidays such as Yom Kippur and Diwali. They also love the idea or like the idea that the flexible instructional days can be used instead of counting as snow days. Questions or suggestions pertaining particularly to the 21-22 calendar. October is a very long month without a break in the schedule. Simply asking, can something be adjusted in there just to give a small break? Then they look at the first week of November, and we have 2 days in there in that week that cause closing for our schools, which would be Tuesday, November 2nd for Election Day, and Thursday, November 4th for Diwali. Are we able to take and make November 2nd possibly a flexible instructional day so that students and teachers have 3 consecutive days of instruction? Suggestions pertaining to both calendars. The Monday of Thanksgiving week is the only student day, and it's also an early dismissal day due to the evening being the start of parent-teacher conferences. Suggestion, make this day a flexible instructional day to possibly increase the number of students who would actually be present for instruction at that time. There was only one individual who noted making spring break a full week instead of starting in the middle of the week. And one ongoing request that our teachers have with an early dismissal in each month and the hours that are set for early dismissals, they would like to try and eliminate or combine some of those times to make longer periods of time for PD. And the reason for this is because when they finish an early dismissal, they have the dismissal of the students, but then they may have to travel to other buildings. By the time they get to the professional development, they feel that they're losing a portion of that valuable time, and we're simply, can we go for a longer period of time, which may say, can we take the number of actual dismissals and reduce them? That's all that we have.
So the suggestion about making them, what kind of days are they?
Flexible instruction. Yeah.
That would take away from our snow
Yeah,
days.
I don't know that that's-
We only get 5 days, so
Yeah.
that would concern me. I mean, it sounds like a great idea if we had 10, but if we only have
I'm not sure
5
it's even permissible to use
Right.
them for whatever you want. You know, like, I would have to get some clarification, but right now,
So that,
yeah.
I'm not, I mean, especially the early dismissal day, it certainly makes sense. However, I don't know that it's feasible.
And I want to say something too, that November, because of Diwali, it just happens one time in our whole 2-year calendar. It's a choppy week, but if we want to give Diwali off and we want to have Election Day off, there's no way around that really, but it doesn't happen anywhere else, so, but I don't think we could use a FID day for that.
Who were the teachers that were, who gave feedback?
The curriculum leaders and grade level leaders were presented the drafts for the calendars. After our discussion as leader groups, they were asked to go back and in some way work with their departments and their colleagues. Some had chosen to do that verbally, others have chosen to use a Google Doc and just get accumulated responses, giving individuals time to be able to respond. This is what we received.
Thank you. Have we gotten any feedback from parents?
Ms. Sheila, are you there? Yeah. Any response from parents?
Yeah, I am. I got that one. The only feedback that we got one comment, and it was actually a staff member who commented on the public's survey. So we included that with Ms. Voss's responses.
So is the calendar on our main page for parent feedback, or is it on each school page? Like, how would a parent know to respond to give their feedback on the calendar?
It was the second item under our quick links. The first item on the left-hand side of our quick links is our regular district calendar, the board-approved one, and underneath it, it said 2021, 2022. Wait, no, that's wrong. 2021, 22, 22, 23 calendars for approval, and it had a link. When you clicked on that, it took you to 2 calendars and then a link to share your comments. I'm sorry, it said for public review. So that was up there since our last board meeting. Dr. Lenardi had made an announcement that that's where you would be able to find it. But unfortunately, we only had that one response.
So it's gone now, right?
I don't see it on our webpage
It's gone.
right now.
She took it down. It's not there now.
So
Yeah, I think we
maybe,
took it down now. Didn't we take it down now, Jen?
because we're talking about it and we're voting on it next week, could we have it put back up so that people?
Yeah, sure.
I can put it up right now.
Thank you.
Are we voting on both years or just 1
Yeah,
year?
well, what many districts are doing now is because of the way people plan and such, they're doing 2 years. And so last year we talked about it, but we were kind of already into the 1 year thing. So I said, when we come at you next year, we'll bring 2 years and you vote on both years and then you're done and then you vote. You do it in 2 year cycles. Some districts do it in 3 year cycles now. It's a kind of a newer thing, I guess. And so some of the districts around us in Chester County are doing it. And so I thought, well, it's probably a good idea for planning. No reason not to, or it doesn't change that much. We kind of know the direction we're headed with, our Jewish holidays, our Diwali holidays, that kind of thing. So we thought we'd do it.
Director Wisdom.
The professional development, what was said about not having enough time, traveling to a place, I'm assuming we're, meeting the criteria for what constitutes a half day, so we can't make that half day any shorter. Would it be, and I know that we do this just about, one Wednesday a month, would we be able to, first of all, and would it maybe be well received if we did, instead of a half day every month, a full day every other month? And then that would give them a whole day. They could travel and have a big block of time.
I think the travel impacts our teachers that travel, correct? It's a small percentage of.
Yeah, it does, but also our half-days counts
Yes.
as instructional days. And
Oh,
if
so it's
we
a
make
full
it a
day.
full day, then
Oh.
we have to go more days, which then that's a negotiated thing and all that. So it's
Okay.
a little more complicated than it appears.
I wasn't sure if like a half day plus a half day equaled the whole day, and it didn't matter,
No,
it was the
we-
same thing.
Yeah, you get a credit for the full day.
Okay, all right.
There is something to be said, though, about how much time teachers lose in the travel time and staying back at their building and taking care of kids for dismissal. And if you're at the far end of the district trying to get to a central location, teachers really do lose time.
Well, and maybe that's where we have to look at an accommodation for those teachers on those days.
Well, and
If we can't push the time for the professional development.
yeah, we could look at that, but I also wonder going forward, and it's not good to say this now, but what effect how much Zooming we do now will have on our future PDs.
I thought about that as well.
Yeah.
They
like-
might be able to zoom in rather than.
Yeah, I mean, right now, it's not good to talk about it because everybody's sort of zoomed out, but it might be worthy to do on occasion. But your point's a good one, too, like maybe we could give those teachers a head start on those days in some way, yeah.
Right, if they're supposed to have bus duty, they
Yeah.
You know, there's still somebody who has to stay behind to organize it. Some people are able to leave right away.
No, I understand that, but
Yeah.
you need to look at who it is and whether they're.
I think principals do try to do that, but I think it's still a matter of numbers, and when you have a full component of all your students in school, somebody still has to be watching them.
So we've done this this way and got feedback the last couple of years, and in the beginning, we had pages and pages of feedback, and every year it's gotten a little less, and when we've got a lot of people asking for a certain thing, we've tried to put some of those things in, like we changed when conferences were, for instance, we talked about holidays and diversity, and so just some of those kinds of things, and so maybe it's, maybe that's the reason we're getting fewer comments, I'm not sure.
Or maybe it's COVID.
And maybe it's COVID, maybe it's just.
That's
because
what
people-
really makes me reluctant to approve 2 years this year, because I just don't know that it's.
So just in terms of getting parent feedback, can we get the calendar posted on the school pages, or are the principals or their assistants responsible for that? Because I think when a parent or a child opens their computer, it opens for me to the district webpage, but I think students and families open to their school's webpage. So people are not going to go looking for the calendar to give feedback. And there have been considerable changes to holidays, to the spring break look, that I think it might warrant some reaching out to parents. And principals have now I hate to say this to principals because they're up to their eyeballs in contact tracing, but sending some kind of a message to families to take a look at the calendar. And is there some reason we're rushing to do this in December? Couldn't we do it in January so that people have some time? This is December 2nd. If we're going to put it out to parents and approve it December 9th, it hardly gives people any time with the holiday season and with what they're doing with schools closing, et cetera, to provide feedback. Not to say if you give people a longer amount of time, they'll give more feedback, but I feel as though we have to give people an opportunity to give input.
Well, I unfortunately, and I'll take blame for this, it's been out there for a while. I think maybe.
Oh, I thought Jen just said since our last meeting.
Did it just go up last month?
If I misheard that.
When we talked about it at our, last, I think
Was it last month?
it went up probably after last committee of the whole.
After the last
So
committee.
it's been up for a month.
Yeah, it's been up for a
But
while.
we didn't advertise that it was up for a month. That's more probably the issue.
But if you're a parent, do you go onto a website looking for a calendar to give feedback?
So isn't it still out for the next week so parents can give feedback
For 1 week, yeah.
for one more week?
Well, everybody out there, if you want to give feedback to the school calendar, go to where? Your school website, Jen, it'll be on every school's website?
It's currently on our district website. I'd be happy to move it to the school websites if the board would like to do that.
Okay,
That would be helpful, I
so
think.
there you go.
Okay, we'll try that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
MOU pending, is that?
So I was hoping to be able to show you the MOU. If you remember, the board authorized us to make some changes in paying teachers for covering classes in emergencies when we don't have enough subs. And so, and we negotiated that with the association, and we decided that if a teacher was covering a class, the top amount you could get for kind of additional duties during the day are $41. And so we agreed on that. But then if a teacher actually teaches the class, like say they're covering in an emergency because we can't find a Spanish teacher or something like that, and they're a Spanish teacher, like they're certificated in that area, and they can actually go in and teach the lesson, then we're paying them more. And so we talked about a per diem amount. And so that per diem will be 20%. Since they teach 5 classes, it would be 20% of their per diem. So we had talked about both here, and I think the board was pretty good either way. And so we actually kind of split it, and we said if you're just covering, it'll be the lesser amount essentially, but if you're if you're teaching, it'll be the additional amount. And so I think that has really helped us. And we said to teachers, we'll make it retroactive from when they came back in November, but that it's going to take a little to get the MOU. So the reason I put it on here, I was hoping to show you the MOU. The association doesn't have it finished, and I'd like to do something kind of unorthodox, and that is if they have it ready, I'd like us to vote on it next week. But we usually don't vote first. But their meeting, their executive council meeting isn't until December 15th. So if we voted on it on the 9th and they approved it on the 15th, we could pay the teachers before the holiday. And I just thought that would be a nice gesture on our part. So if the board's okay with that and they have the MOU ready, you'll see it. But that's what it's going to say. So, and we'll hopefully then the association will approve it and we'll be good to go.
Great.
Okay, everybody good with that?
Yes.
Great, thank you.
Okay, moving on, public comment. Ms. Warhay, we have public comment?
We do.
Okay, the Downingtown Board of Directors encourages public comment from its citizens. Each community member may speak for a period of no longer than 5 minutes. Please understand, this is not a time for dialogue with the board. Rather, the board will listen to all comments and consider them in further deliberations. Our individual email addresses are on the website if you'd like to contact your individual board representative. We ask that you please direct complaints of a personnel nature regarding an individual employee directly to the superintendent. So with that, I will wish you luck.
Robert Butler from West Bradford Township. I've asked the board, the head of tech, and the super why we, the people, are not allowed to have public comments during board meetings. I have watched other school boards have live comments with no problems. If this is how the board is going to continue to have meetings, they need to open a Zoom-type account that will allow we, the people, to have live comments. Having comments read aloud is not good enough. The board, the head of tech, and the super have had enough time to figure this out. The people need to be heard. Tammy LaRosa from Euclid Township. Please consider getting these kids in school on Monday. Why would you bring kids back on a half day? You have had plenty of time to see how the numbers are playing out from Thanksgiving. There are 3 options of learning for our students: cyber, virtual, and hybrid. Let hybrid students get the chance to learn in the environment they decided is best for their health. Try to think from a hybrid student's point of view. James Holt from West Wallace Township. I would like to commend the board who have recognized the importance of in-person education and the low incidence of risk that has been shown by opening our schools. I believe it has been shown that the transition has been safe. It is time to consider full 5-day in-person education. The inferiority of virtual education has been demonstrated and documented time and again. The CDC, Dr. Fauci, and others have recommended schools stay open. Brent Mounts from Euclid Township. Your strategy of closing schools on a case-by-case basis is proving to be working. Please continue with this strategy, as in-person schooling is essential to the health and welfare of our kids. There is overwhelming scientific evidence to prove that transmission rates in schools is incredibly low. I believe that any in-person education is significantly more than just marginal, and that our kids are excelling while in-person and lagging while in virtual. I also implore you to consider moving to a full 5-day per week on an in-class instruction, while keeping the option of the Cyber Academy open to offer those families who wish to keep their kids home. There was a statistic floated at the last meeting that 70% of the students are 100% virtual. If that statistic is true, however unlikely, then there is no reason that we can't open to 5 days of in-person schooling per week while running at 30% capacity. Amy Marcico from Upper Euclid Township. Members of the community, DASD has failed to accurately communicate the guidance set forth by the Pennsylvania Department of Education. According to the data, we are currently in the substantial phase, with numbers rising quickly. The Department of Health and PDE recommend a full remote learning environment for all schools in the county. The district has not shared that they have chosen not to follow the recommendation. This recommendation comes from 2 governing bodies, which we were promised they would listen to. I urge DASD to follow the recommendation and convert back to virtual learning 100% of the time. We are in the middle of cold and flu season and the holiday season, and entering into the cold and flu season. The community has experienced pandemic fatigue. Families will gather and COVID will continue to spread. Vaccines and treatments aren't available and won't be for months. I ask that we put our time, energy, and resources into making virtual learning as effective as possible. By returning to virtual, all students will get equal opportunities to interact with peers and their teachers. The model was working earlier in the fall, and we can build from that experience. It is a known fact that children are asymptomatic carriers of the virus. While it may not be the easiest solution for all, it is certainly the safest given the current spread in our community. Downingtown should be virtual 100% now. Carrie Gross of Euclid Township. Hello. With the rapid rise of COVID cases and the anticipated run on our hospitals in December, I urge the board to take every precaution possible to keep our community safe from deaths and long-term health effects. When in the building, we need proper mask wearing at all times and assurance that masks aren't vented or cheesecloth type materials. I understand that every family and every child has specific needs, but I feel strongly that it is important we make decisions for the greater good of the community. I believe schools should be 100% remote, as we are at the highest incident rate this year. Tara Harlander from Upper Euclid Township. I would like for the board to understand that my family is happy with full virtual learning, and that there are many other families like us out there. We are not as vocal as those who want to keep in-person learning open, because up until now, the numbers were low enough in the community to support allowing families to choose in person if they needed to. That is no longer the case. Community case numbers are soaring, and we are only at the beginning of the winter. Hospitals are close to being overwhelmed. Outpatient doctors are being asked to report in to allow inpatient ones to spend the considerable amount of time it requires to properly care for their COVID patients. People are ignoring stay-at-home orders when they've been exposed. Families are sending in children and siblings even when they are positive tests in the household, and there seems to be no penalty for this. What happens when a nurse finds out that someone is in school and they see their name on a list of a positive COVID test from the county, or that their sibling has been exposed and they were allowed to return to school the following day? These actions are not only irresponsible, but they need to be punishable by a fine. Sadly, it has gotten to the point where the school district can no longer assume that people are doing the right thing. From what I've been told, the hybrid model isn't working for most kids. They sit at home on their virtual days and observe the other half of their class interacting with their teacher, waiting for someone to allow them to speak. This is by far not as effective as having kids on a call together every day, consistently, and with equal opportunities to interact. Asking teachers to educate two different ways at the same time is stretching them very thin, and bouncing kids in and out due to cases popping from one school to another is unfair. The hybrid model is not working well enough to justify the risks associated with keeping in-person learning open. Please follow the county's recommendation to close. Nicole Miller from Euclid Township. I am writing to please ask you to prioritize not only the safety of the students and staff, but the safety of our entire community and return schooling back to virtual. There is a light at the end of the tunnel, and we all need to work together to make it to the other side. The state level is not going to make this hard decision for you. It is up to you, our board, to do the right thing for the common good of our community. Bethany Reynolds from West Bradford Township. If more schools are going to close because of the impact of COVID, please ensure the in-person pilot for those children who need access education in a specialist learning environment because of an IEP resumes and can remain in person. I have a child at home doing cyber because it is the safest place for him to learn. My younger son goes to school because he has an IEP and needs to be in the building. Please do your utmost to keep the children safe. Please follow the metrics you said you would follow to keep my children and those in our community safe. Sarah Wolf from West Bradford Township. I urge the committee to move Downingtown to a virtual format. Not only are our teachers at great risk with few choices, our students are at risk. By having schools open, we are providing a vehicle of transmission inside and outside the school. Cases are on the rise, and many families are sending kids even when a member of their family has symptoms. This specifically happened in my elementary school. Older students are brought to the same location and then likely gathering after the last bell. Schools saying it is okay to open sends the message to students that it's okay to gather. Why wouldn't it be? They've been gathering all day. Thus, schools open lead to more community transmissions. We have to be careful about the messages we send and the situations we place both staff and students. We should hold tight until after the holidays and keep everyone home. Finally, during this trying time, I have yet to find a district that doesn't build in some sort of mental health break. For those on Zooms all day, students need a break. What is done in school cannot be replicated on Zoom. These kids are wilting as they sit in the same chair all day, every day. Is there a way we could build in a no Zoom Friday? Some schools are giving more time between classes. We need something for these kids. Laura Mangini from Upper Euclid Township. Thank you for accepting comments. I would like to comment on behalf of those of us who are being diligent in staying home. Given that doctors and scientists are predicting that we are about to enter into the darkest days of the pandemic, it seems reckless to even consider sending children back to school 5 days a week. As numbers rise daily to all-time highs across the U.S., I would like to advocate for the health of our students, faculty, and staff in hoping that the district considers a full virtual model until the spring. It provides consistency for the students, the full attention from the teachers for all students on Zoom, and prevents unnecessary sicknesses and possible deaths. Why wait until there is an abundance of cases in each school before moving to this model when the technology is already in place? Thank you again. Lindsay Polidor from Downingtown Borough. I just want to say thank you to the school board for doing everything they can to keep our schools open. My middle schooler is doing so much better just being in the building 2 days a week. I have noticed a difference in his mood, and he is so excited each morning that he gets to go to school. Our kids need options for school, and I'm so thankful that Downingtown has a solution for every family. Kristen Byler from East Brandywine Township. I want a choice to send my kid to in-person education. Everyone who wants virtual has a choice. Actually, 2 choices now, to sign up and keep their child home. I want the choice to send my kids in person because this is how they should learn. My daughter, 5th grade, was missing most assignments on full virtual, like 5 to 7 assignments or more a week. She was late for online classes, didn't understand the lessons, couldn't ask for help due to her not knowing her teachers and being comfortable asking for help from strangers. My son in kindergarten doesn't understand the virus and why he can't go to school on a daily basis in person. He hates Zoom. He cries on Zoom when he doesn't get what he needs to do, gets overwhelmed, and I have to sit with him or near him during the entire class day to help him find his papers, switch to different classes in an app, do assignments since he can't read, do extra stuff with him because he's missing so much with virtual. The teachers are doing the best they can given the regulations. I want the schools to try and keep the kids in person for as long as they can. Kids belong in a classroom learning from what public education is designed for. It's not the district's responsibility to close to help the spread. It's the district's obligation to educate our children and do what's best for all children and all abilities or disabilities, not what's best for the portion of the student body. Kim Reese from West Bradford Township. Due to the safety of our staff and students, the district should return to an all-virtual model and reevaluate this plan after the holidays in January. This will not create a loss of learning or instruction, as many board members mentioned previously. This actually creates an even playing field for teachers to instruct and give attention to all learners equally on the virtual platform versus the current staggered model, where they are trying hard to manage and educate in-person students while also teaching students virtually. Instruction time will not be lost. The safety of our staff and students should be our first priority. Nikki Wellen from West Bradford Township. Please follow the science and not emotion. Kids need to be in school, and this is currently what is recommended by the CDC. Please keep the hybrid model in place to support our kids' education. I would prefer my three kids attend school 5 days a week. However, let's at least keep hybrid as an option. For those who need to keep their kids home, they have that choice. Please don't take away mine. Thank you. John Otten from Euclid Township. Given the importance of local engagement, the Pennsylvania Department of Health has provided recommendations for local, municipal, and county leaders to implement their own orders and directives and orders to protect health and safety as long as they are stricter than those mandated by the state. Our local leaders should conduct a transparent discussion about what is in the greatest good for our school community and exercise their authority and influence to support public health efforts that will protect residents in our local economy. The expectation of good governance is that when 9 members of the board come together to have open and curious discussions, those needs will be met. I encourage our local leaders to start doing this with courage and conviction immediately. Heather Barrett from West Bradford Township. The district must be transparent and follow the metrics they promised us they would. These metrics are still in place at both the county and state level. They have not changed. The guidance issued by the Department of Health and PDE on November 23rd still recommends a full remote learning model for all schools in counties with substantial levels of community transmission. This information was not directly presented by the superintendent at the last board meeting. The district should be clear that it has chosen to take advantage of a loophole in this guidance and close individual schools with certain numbers of cases. This is a reactive measure and absolutely no rationale for this decision has been given. Chester County has been in the substantial range for 4 weeks and has now over double the substantial incidence rate. It is not enough for the board to state that our kids need to be in school, as that is an opinion and not a fact. The metrics and the increase in community incident rates are facts. In addition, the governor's orders from November 23rd state that the telework is mandatory unless impossible. Teachers taught remotely for months at the beginning of the school year. It is not impossible. The staggered model forces our teachers to split their time between 2 cohorts, with neither group receiving the quality of education that our teachers are capable of. This is not beneficial to either group. Putting our teachers in harm's way, providing a lower quality of education for all, and ignoring the recommendation for a fully remote learning model is dangerous and irresponsible. Please do the right thing and follow the metrics as promised. That's it.
Thank you once again, Ms. Warhay. For information, the school board meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, December 9th, and the next committee of the whole is scheduled for Wednesday, January 6th. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Have a good night, everyone.
Goodbye.
Thank you.